Hello, my name's Richard, and this is a presentation I gave in Shrewsbury to the Hum Squad on the 31st of January 2019. Elegant Ecological Frugality, Fixing Climate Change £5 at a Time. And I'm going to show you in the next 20 minutes or so how we can take back control of our money, our well-being and our planet. And here's a legal slide. What we're doing to fix human-induced climate change and unsustainable energy isn't working fast enough. We have almost all of the knowledge, most of the tools, and perhaps all of the technology. But the climate change train is still accelerating because of economic growth. It's hard to slow a big fast thing down. It's extra hard to slow a big fast thing down that's still accelerating. But before I share my ideas with you and tell you a bit more about my own personal why, I'd like to set my talk in context by taking you on a journey. This journey helps me to see humankind's impact in context. So I want you to imagine that instead of having existed for 4.6 billion years, planet Earth is just 1 year old. Imagine that the Earth was created or formed on the 1st of January. Well, it took 87 days for the very simplest forms of life, microorganisms, to appear on the 28th of March. Then there was a really long wait, a wait of 8 months, until the 20th of November, until after the great oxygenation of our atmosphere, when invertebrates appeared. At lunchtime on the 11th of December, dinosaurs showed up, and by late afternoon on Christmas Day, they had become extinct. Now let's jump to just before midnight on New Year's Eve, the 31st of December. Well, at 23 minutes to midnight on New Year's Eve, us modern humans, Homo sapiens, arrived just in time for the party. At 18 seconds to midnight, Buddha was born, and at 1.8 seconds to midnight, electricity was discovered. And at just 1 second to midnight, the Industrial Revolution began, just 15 miles east from where I'm now sitting, in the Iron Bridge Gorge. Clever humans discovered how to unlock the amazing energy potential in coal to power a radically different and new way of living. And in the last few tenths of a second of the year, we've been having one hell of a party. But before we get to the gossip from that party, I'd like to tell you why I'm recording this today. Who is recording this today, I hear you say? Well, I'm Richard Davis, and I call myself an ecological inventor, initiator, and investor. And let me say good evening, and I hope it is the evening that you're listening this to. Well, I want to take you back to 1972, when I was 7 years old, just 7 years old. I was living in Tamworth, in the Midlands, in a county called Staffordshire, and a tiny bit obsessed with survival, with self-reliance, with self-sufficiency. I used to spend hours and hours making survival kits by packing old sweet tins with fishing lines, stock cubes, emergency foil blankets, making sure that whatever happened to me and wherever I found myself, I'd be okay. My parents had both lived through the Second World War. I'm not sure they ever really knew what enough was when I was growing up. Dad grew pretty much all of his own vegetables and fruit. Mum made most of my clothes and cut my hair. I think you can tell that this is a mum haircut. Growing up, I was very aware of providing, and I think I became quite anxious about providing enough. And this has led me to a really interesting place, and I'd like to tell you a bit more about that. Well, I took the science track at school. I chose the vocational and really secure subject of chemical engineering at university. And then I was fortunate to find a really cool first job. Working with a team inventing and then commercializing the beautifully ecological man-made fibre called Tencel in the UK and the USA. And this just gives you an idea of the process of Tencel, an amazing fibre made from trees in a circular process. I had 3 patents as a co-inventor in my name, and I had 10 really exciting and rewarding years. And this is an image showing the beautiful lyocell or Tencel fabric. And then I did something a tiny bit odd for someone with provider anxiety. I listened to my heart, and I decided just after the birth of Meg, my first young person, to give up the corporate track and focus on single-handedly saving the planet. I founded a climate change and sustainable energy not-for-profit called March's Energy Agency, based here in Shrewsbury. Anyway, more of that later. We have to return to that party. It was just before midnight on New Year's Eve. Let's see what's happening by looking at some graphs. Well, The first graph is of human population from about 10,000 BC through to the present day. It took all of human history up until the year of 1804 for the world's human population to reach 1 billion. But the next billion came only 123 years later in 1927. And after that, the rate of population growth accelerated. We got to 3 billion just 32 years later in 1959, 4 billion 15 years later in 1974, and then the population went to 5 billion just 13 years later in 1987. We got to 6 billion 12 years later in 1999 and 7 billion in 2011. Human population today in 2019 stands at around 7.4 billion. The next graph shows GDP per capita or per human. And remember, to work out the total GDP of planet Earth of everyone, you have to multiply the population graph by this graph. Clearly, we've all become, on average, a lot richer very rapidly. And through that process of wealth, we've also dramatically increased the global carbon emissions from fossil fuels. This graph shows emissions of carbon in million metric tons between 1900 and 2014. And in terms of carbon dioxide, not carbon, this is around 40,000 million metric tons of carbon dioxide every year. Well, as you can see, we have become pretty skilled at what mostly looks like exponential growth. Maybe the 7.4 billion people at this party really don't think they're going to run out of beer and snacks. And I just want to bring to life that 40,000 million metric tons of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere every year. This is what 1 ton of CO2 looks like around a 10-meter diameter balloon. And those 40,000 million 10-meter diameter balloons are ending up largely in the troposphere. This kind of layer of varnish on the football, as it's described, just this 7 mile, 8 mile-ish on average, thick bit of atmosphere where most of the gases in our atmosphere reside. If we were able to walk vertically upwards, we could reach the edge of the troposphere in just 2.5 hours of walking. And this is why we're having an impact on planet Earth's climate. And if any of you are kind of wavering at this point, I just want to provide you positive proof of global warming. And one fact that I think is fascinating before we get into some of the detail is the UK has used a lot of coal, around 4.5 billion tonnes of coal to generate electricity every single day since 1882. The UK's first coal-free day since the Industrial Revolution began only happened just over 21 months ago on the 21st of April 2017. We'd had 135 years of burning 350 million year old trees, where we waste 70% of the energy in that coal making electricity, waste a further 7% of that electricity we make distributing it through the grid, and then we waste a further 47% through inefficient and unnecessary usage. I don't think anyone would call that smart energy. So we're having a really good party. We aren't taking too good care of the venue, and we're being a tiny bit inconsiderate to our neighbours. I'm not sure us humans will get to see another New Year's Eve party if we don't truly wake up to our collective unsustainability. Well, many of us has woken up. Many good people are trying to make our party more sustainable. I myself finally properly woke up to this personally and professionally in 1999. I followed in my parents' self-sufficiency footsteps. I fixed up my old house so it was carbon negative with super insulated walls, roof and floor, 4 kilowatt peak of photovoltaics, solar thermal and biomass heating. I also founded the UK's first EU-supported energy agency based in Shrewsbury, trying to fix human-induced climate change and unsustainable energy at a local level. The energy agency is called March's Energy Agency and still going strong, trying to help a sustainable energy future happen faster with money, projects and ideas, providing practical support to real problems and trying to encourage the sustainable energy revolution and innovation. Me and my colleagues at the Energy Agency worked with hundreds of communities, thousands of organisations and tens of thousands of households. I gave this job my best for 15 years. The Queen of England even invited me to Buckingham Palace to give me a medal. This was good work to be involved with, but of course not nearly enough, even if every community had a sustainable energy agency. And here is the problem: economic growth. Economic growth is the elephant in the room. Our economy appears to be built on the need for forever increasing pointless consumption. Our current economic model is threatening the very foundations on which human well-being depends. Ecological collapse cannot be prevented through consumer choice or by corporate social responsibility. We must find our way to post-growth economics, steady-state economics, and then to degrowth. And Kate Raworth's wonderful work of donut economics really helped me to understand the ideas of social boundaries and planetary boundaries. There is not enough for many in the developing world, and there is too much for most in the developed world. And we must find our way into the green part of this donut. And maybe for some of us that's about coming back in through the ecological ceiling, and for many it's about breaking through the social foundation into the safe and just space for humanity. Last September's Hothouse Earth paper warned of the danger of flipping our planet into a new irreversible climatic state. It concluded that incremental linear changes are not enough to stabilise the Earth system. Widespread, rapid and fundamental transformations will likely be required to reduce the risk of crossing the threshold. And I'm sure most of you will have been challenged by the latest Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's report published late last year. Let's spend a few moments looking at what the report says. Well, the report is focused on staying below 1.5 degrees centigrade. This new limit was agreed in Paris in 2015 with 195 countries backing the goal. In fact, only Syria and Nicaragua haven't signed. Oh, and it looks like America may unsign in a few years' time. The report states that average global temperatures have already risen by 1 degree centigrade, and at current rates, human-caused global warming will add about 0.2 degrees centigrade every decade. To limit emissions to 1.5 degrees, to limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, emissions need to fall by around 45% from 2010 levels to 2020, and to reach net zero by 2050. We have around 12 years to fix this. The report states that staying below 1.5 degrees will require rapid, far-reaching and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. And this graph just gives a different view in terms of my own and my family's journey and the temperature of planet Earth and the predicted temperatures in a high, mid and low scenario going into the future. It is almost as though what we are currently witnessing is a real-life version of the Emperor's New Clothes. Clean growth sounds almost as dumb as clean coal. We won't be saving the planet with a better type of takeout coffee cup. So, what do I want to share with you? What's my fix? Well, as someone who is anxious about having enough personally, but also anxious about there being too much globally, too much unsustainable energy, too much carbon dioxide, well, what I learned was that it's about the money stupid, that by taking a radically different approach to money, you can fix both problems, the problem of enough and that of too much. And through fixing human-induced climate change and the human need for security, it can also help fix many of our other societal challenges. The challenges of poverty, inequality, obesity, poor mental and physical health. And especially for you, I have given this fix a name, Elegant Ecological Frugality. And by embracing this idea, you can enjoy a super cool and really powerful side effect. And this is my gift to you, the gift of you only having to work 10.9 years. So let's explore my fix by exploring the power of £5. In the UK economic system, if you divide the total amount of money spent on everything by the total amount of carbon dioxide produced in the economy, then you discover that spending £5 emits on average just over 1 kilo of carbon dioxide. So not spending £5 saves around 1 kilo of CO2. But now for the delightful side effect. Not spending £5 also buys you a piece of freedom. Not spending £5 gives me 4.2 minutes of income that allows me to do whatever I wish with my time every year forever. How does that work? Well, if you invest in something that gives you a 7% return a year, maybe good equities or shares in a renewable energy project, and we set aside 3% of that 7% to take care for inflation, you are left with a real term rate of return of 4%. So every year your £5 not spent has money babies worth 20p forever. And for me, 20 pence is enough money to live on for 4.2 minutes. That works out at around £25,000 a year. And I'm assuming I'm living with another human who also has an income of £25,000 a year. Not spending £71 gives me an hour of freedom every year forever. And depending on how much money you need to live on, not spending £5 will also give you a chunk of everlasting freedom. So we can just like recap on that, the exchange rate of £5, just over a kilo of CO2 and 4.2 minutes of retirement if you choose to do that. I discovered the brilliant ideas of the financial independence movement. And what I discovered was very exciting for me. I worked out that I only had to work for 10.9 years. Anyone anywhere only ever has to work for 10.9 years. Now this does call for some pretty radical frugality, living on just £1 for every £3 you earn, but there are other versions of this for those who can't or won't adopt this level of not spending. Not spending is a very radical act that saves carbon, gives me freedom, and by investing the money not spent in positive ecological projects, maybe sustainable energy, does good and saves more carbon too. This isn't just a free lunch, it's a lunch I get paid to eat every day that fixes the planet and gives me the afternoon off work too. If someone spends all of their income, then they can never stop working. If they don't spend any of their income, then they can stop working today. It actually took me a little bit longer than 10.9 years, actually 15 years from when I first started on the elegant ecological frugality track to be able to retire. I stopped being an employee 5 years ago, 6 months before my 50th birthday. And this is just a different version that shows if you can live on £1 of every £2 you earn, then you can retire after 15 years. And this is pretty much the track that I took. And I could spend hours telling you how I live my life. From homemade sourdough bread, yogurt, tempeh and beer, to investment in community-owned wind and photovoltaics, to fixing my own stuff, to peer-to-peer lending, to micro-adventures in my own backyard of Shropshire. No one thing either surprising or revolutionary, but maybe collectively they do add up to something pretty good, I think, a life well lived. So I've worked out how to do this personally, which is great for me, but that doesn't help planet Earth too much. What I need is your help with how we can do this at scale. How can we remake our economy? How do we tap into the movements of conscious consumption, the circular economy, minimalism, and make the money circular too? We need a Blue Planet 2 ocean plastics moment for conscious consumption, a Me Too movement. And when we look at the big numbers, the investment needed to deliver a low-carbon, sustainable energy future, it actually looks naively achievable. Small amounts of money from lots of people can fix climate change and unsustainable energy. Let's look at two examples, the EU and the world. Well, the European Commission says that the EU requires 177 billion euros of additional investment every year to deliver a clean and sustainable energy future and fix climate change at a European level. That's only 239 euros per year per EU citizen, or just 20 euros per month each. And this isn't some idealistic charitable donation, it's real grown-up investment with long-term returns. And globally too, the International Energy Agency has calculated that as a planet we need to invest $29 trillion between 2015 and 2050 to meet the old 2 degrees centigrade target. That's $829 billion a year. That's just $111 per global citizen per year, or just $2 each per week. Again, not an act of philanthropy, but of high-quality asset investment. And clearly, many people on the planet can't afford $111 per global citizen per year, but many of us could afford to invest more than that. And I think it's truly ironic that the annual global advertising spend is around $600 billion a year, almost enough to fix climate change at a planetary level. Maybe this future is already unfolding. The Transition Network, Extinction Rebellion, the Simplicity Institute in Australia, the Tiny House Movement worldwide, the FIRE Movement, Financial Independence Retire Early, Mr. Money Moustache. Yes, do look him up. Or maybe some of you are thinking, listen to this baby boomer, he's had it good. It's different now. How can he be suggesting that I live on less than half my income? Does he not know how much rent is these days? Well, maybe it is a little bit different, maybe different in as many good ways as not so good ways, with some of the good ways being financial technology or fintech, the sharing economy, crowdfunding, maybe even a new consciousness fit to fix the problem. Well, I hope you like my idea. Maybe it's a revolutionary idea that provides a path to security for those who need that, and it also offers you the possibility of doing heart work and not sleep working. a possibility that you can be free to pursue a life of meaning and purpose, and that in doing so you can dramatically reduce your carbon emissions through simplicity, elegant frugality, and minimalism, that you can invest your surplus money for good, helping a sustainable future happen more quickly in the places where it needs to, and to allow the parts of the planet that need to grow the headroom to grow. I'm sure you've all got really important work to do, even if some of you are not entirely sure what it is yet. So maybe it's a bit premature to be talking about retirement. But of course, the lovely thing about not having to work is that you can find a different sort of work, a work that you can do for all of the right reasons. So remember that money equals carbon. Remember that you only need to work for 10.9 years. And remember that sometimes freedom is nicer than security, that many experiences are nicer than most things, that time is often nicer than money, and most important, that the best things in life aren't things. Man is the most insane species. He worships an invisible God and destroys a visible nature, unaware that this nature he's destroying is this God he's worshipping. Picasso said, "I'd like to live as a poor man with lots of money." And Groucho Marx said, "What have future generations ever done for us?" Well, to answer Groucho, nothing. But that's not the point of future generations. Maybe the least we could do for them is to allow them the opportunity of having another New Year's Eve party, the coolest party, the most sustainable party, a beautiful party. And next time you have £5 in your hand, feel the weight of 1 kilo of carbon dioxide and feel the pleasure of 4.2 minutes of freedom every year forever, and decide whether what you are going to spend that £5 on is really worth it. Thank you.